Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to start by holding this mic. So to all of you, thank you. I would like to actually begin by saying a word of much gratitude to DAG, Ashish, Kishore, and the entire DAG team for facilitating a talk on art and law. I must confess that it is a challenging talk. Something which is considered completely diametric opposite fields. How do we bring it together? So I need a segue, and the segue I've decided is to actually look at my work. So what I'm doing is I'm going to very quickly jump through what's been done. There are 6 volumes written on Raja Ravi Varma. They're titled An Everlasting Imprint. This is volume 1, which looks at Ravi Varma and what influenced Raja Ravi Varma. This is volume 2, which we are looking at is how the image goes from the painter to the public via the agency of the Ravi Varma press. Then we have volume 3, which looks at the images associated with worship, the Lakshmis, the Saraswatis, and all of that. Then we have volume 4, which looks at Ramayana and Mahabharata. We have volume 5, which is the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Gita Govinda, and the plays. I think all of you all will recognize the cover there. And then we have volume 6, which looks at images associated with power and the allure of the feminine. So what I've done is you have 2,140 pages on Raja Ravi Varma. But I'm sure all of you all must be thinking, what the hell's a lawyer doing writing on art? Why don't you just go back to court and leave art to us? I must be honest that this is a question which actually I had as I wrote the 6 volumes. I said, am I going to be taken seriously? Is a lawyer going to be taken seriously writing on art? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a challenge which I had as I was writing the books and as these books are received by the discerning public. Of course, friends were constantly telling me things like, oh, you know, don't worry, Karl Kandawala did it. Like, Karl Kandawala did it, but what about me? So, you know, we have to reach stages like that. And when I was actually thinking about it, I realized I really didn't have to think too far. Why? Because of this painting. So let's just start by looking at this. What is this painting? So Ravi Varma was born 1848, and this was commissioned 1870. And it's important for 2 reasons, 2 very important reasons. Reason number 1 is because this was Ravi Varma's first commissioned painting. Now, to all the artists here, I'm sure, what's the big deal? I mean, all of us do it, right? But not so with Ravi Varma. Why? Because when Ravi Varma comes from a family in Kilimanur, it's an aristocracy. It's not a royal family, it's an aristocracy in which many of the men married the princesses of Travancore. But the aristocracy, the Kilimanur aristocracy, was a very special and a unique one. They were Kshatriyas, basically warrior community. But this family did not indulge in war. They indulged in the arts. So what were they doing? There were many painters. It wasn't just Raja Ravi Varma who hailed from Kilimanur as a painter. There were many painters. His uncle Bharani Tirunal Raja Varma was a painter. His sister Mangalabai was a painter. His brother was a painter. They also indulged in dance, Kathakali and Tullal. His own mother, Uma Amba Tamburati, wrote the dance script for Parvati Swayamvaram. But when they did all of this work in the arts, they never took compensation. There was no recompense. You did it out of love, you did it out of passion, you did it out of the sheer joy of it. And then comes this. And Ravi Varma receives remuneration. What it does is, of course, within the Kilimanur section, you can imagine it's at the cat among the pigeons. They said, how dare you receive money? But what it does to all of us is that it sets Ravi Varma along a course which eventually leads to all of us knowing a particular Lakshmi, a particular Saraswati. And it all starts because he becomes professional with this. So it's a very important painting. With Ravi Varma, for sure, what actually happens is it sets him down. He's now commissioned by Baroda, he's commissioned by Mysore, he's commissioned by Thiruvananthapuram, he's commissioned by Udaipur, he's commissioned by so many people. And the reason he's doing it is because he's commissioned by him. But who was the person who commissioned him? The gentleman on the left, Kilake Palat Krishna Menon. Now, who was he? He was a judge of the Mangalore court. So, in my article for Iconic, I say that Ravi Varma's first commission wasn't a royal commission, it didn't come from a Maharaja. It wasn't a regal commission, it was a legal commission. So, this is where the actual association begins. The one who sees potential in an artist, the one who pays him, the one who changes him onto a track is him, a lawyer, a judge, a member of the fraternity. But this actually has two lawyers, in case you don't know. One, of course, is Kilake Palat, who's on the extreme left, and the one in the center is his son, who goes on to become a barrister. And the one on the right is his wife, who's Induliyaman, Palat Induliyaman. So it's a very interesting painting that Ravi Varma's first commission came from a member of my fraternity. But he wasn't the only one who was in. I'm now going to sit down because now you have to see the PPT. Ravi Varma was actually engaged by very, very many other lawyers. And we're going to start by looking at some of them. Okay, so there we go. These are some of the other lawyers who Ravi Varma was interacting with. The gentleman on the left really needs no introduction, Dadabhai Naroji. Dadabhai Naroji, of course, we all know who he is, but how did he alter Ravi Varma? What he did was, it is said that he is the person who convinced Ravi Varma to start the press in his name. Until that time, Ravi Varma was actually thinking of having his pictures printed at Chitrashala, which was already there, but he sets it in action. The other gentleman which you're seeing there on the top is Justice T. Muthuswamy Iyer, who was the first native judge of the Madras High Court. So here's another interaction between Ravi Varma and a lawyer. And that photograph which you're seeing there of a very fine gentleman in a barrister's robe is G.P. Pillai. Now, where did this photograph come from? This comes from Ravi Varma's family archive, and it's written at the bottom, with regards G.P. Pillai, 1901. Who was he? He is supposed to be the person who was instrumental in bringing the Congress party to Kerala, and if Wikipedia is to be believed, he is the only Malayali who finds a mention in Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography. So Ravi Varma was interacting with very many lawyers, starting with him, and then I'm going to take you to the number of people he interacts with. We have 3. So now I place before you, if you're asking me what the hell is a lawyer doing writing on art, we have precedent. Enough of it, I think. What I want to also get into now is, we've finished segment 1, where we are talking about Ravi Varma directly interacting with lawyers. But what happened to his pictures? How are they interacting with law? What I find very interesting is that many of these resonate to the present day, and that is now the second exploration which I want to get into. What happened to the pictures? How did the courts get involved in many of Ravi Varma's pictures? So let us look at the next slide of something which happened very recently. Whoops. There. I think we all know what happened there, right? Yes. Okay. Now the giggles are starting. It takes time for you all to start giggling. Okay. So he posed nude. Instagram was riot with all of this. They said, how could you pose nude? He actually got sued for obscenity. And what happened is, when he got sued for obscenity, Milind Soman comes to his rescue on Twitter. And he says, no, don't worry, it happened to me when I also posed nude. And nothing has changed from the time of Raja Ravi Varma. So look at how Raja Ravi Varma is being brought into the modern context. What is he talking about? What happened to Raja Ravi Varma? I'm sure all of you all saw Rangrasya, the movie, where all, there was a model, there was a court case. The question is, did it actually happen? Interestingly, I did get into the archive and I said, all right, we have to figure out whether Ravi Varma was actually sued. It doesn't feature in any of the narratives till now. Who sued him? What was the picture which was sued? What is it which actually happened? And I went into the Bombay archives, the High Court archives, and I realized there was a case. But I'm going to take you into the details now. Let's look at that. So what happened was, C. Rajaraja Varma, who was Ravi Varma's brother, had a travelogue. And in the travelogue, he says that in 1895, they were in Bombay and they had met Justice John Jardine and Justice Ranade. Justice Ranade, for all of you people from Maharashtra would know, is a very celebrated figure, not just as a judge, but he also participated in many other movements, including the Chhatrapati Shivaji movement, bringing back the Ganesha Utsav. So he was a very prominent person in the Maharashtra belt. What did they do? They invited Raja Ravi Varma, his brother, and Prince Martanda Varma. You please come to the High Court and see what we do. So after they go to the High Court on the next day, and in the travelogue, there is a notation that they were listening to a case. He says they were hearing a case of a very interesting nature. It finds a place in the travelogue. And what was it? A Pune art dealer was sued for having sold obscene pictures. So the court gets into this deliberation by looking at the picture, which is of a girl coming out of a pond in the forest. So I'm assuming that's the picture on the left. And the court gets into a deliberation and it actually says, do you think that's obscene? So let us look at the girl. If the girl conforms to a classical figure of antiquity, then it's not obscene. So they look at the girl and they say, I think she looks like a classical. But the judges go on to say, on the branches is hanging silken umbrellas and her inner unmentionables. So the picture's obscene. And off he goes to the cooler. At the time when the case was there, clarification number one, Ravi Varma was not the accused. Somebody else was the accused. It's actually a reported judgment. It features in the Bombay law reports. It was a Pune dealer. What was Ravi Varma doing? He was sketching the court scene. That's all he was doing, and that's the court scene. And what was C. Rajaraja Varma doing? C. Rajaraja Varma was noting it down. What is very interesting is that when you look at this and you look at the law of obscenity, I've written an article in the Critical Collective, for those of you all who are subscribed to Gayatri Sinha's Critical Collective, specifically only on obscenity. It traces it all the way back to the Curl judgment. And then it comes down all the way into when it enters India. And when it enters India, it doesn't even enter it legislatively first. It enters it through the proceedings of the Education Department. The British, who by then have formulated something called the Hicklin's test, which basically says something is obscene if it results in a transformation of a person susceptible to it. So either if you're not susceptible to it or you're all too corrupted, it's not obscene. It's only applicable to the people in the middle of it. The Hicklin's test. So what basically happened is when it came into India, it came in through the Education Department. And they took this Victorian standard, they took this Victorian binary standard and tried to apply it into a very non-judgmental, diverse Indian thought. The archive is very interesting. What they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out whether they should expunge the Indian classics from the books. And they say, there's a line which says, to incorporate the Indian classics into the education system is as bad as placing the Arabian Nights before the English domestic circle. So look at how they're judging matters in relation to what we now call obscenity. The problem with obscenity is going to be continuous, and we have had, including this gentleman who's had it, we've had Becker who had a photograph of him, we've had Lady Chatterley Lover which came under fire, we had M.F. Hussain which came under fire, we've had so many where art has come under the sway of law. I argue in the article for Critical Collective that this is going to be a continuous debate. Why is it going to be a continuous debate? Let's look at obscenity. It differs from region to region, age to age. Within the family, it differs between people. It's not only between one person and another, the difference is so acute that if you have an object, and if I see a photograph of a girl and my daughter is next to me, I'll say, no, don't see it, it's obscene. But the very same picture, if I see it in the privacy of my room, I'll say, what a beautiful girl. That is how distinct and different and volatile obscenity is. Not only is it between one person and another person, it is within yourself. If it is obscene in one situation and it is not obscene in another situation for yourself, can it be argued that it is not the object which is obscene, but it is your perception of it or your reaction to it in a given situation? The object remaining neutral throughout. Can that be argued? If you look at that, imagine how difficult it is for you to determine obscenity, especially with art. Because finally it will turn out to be one man's opinion of a policy standard. The judge says it's obscene for the whole of India. The judge says it's not obscene for the whole of India. So imagine the complexities which have arisen and will continue to arise in relation to art and obscenity. It's going to be a never-ending debate, but this is what we should address as to what is and what is not obscene. I'm moving on to the next one. This picture. This is a chromolithograph from the Ravi Varma press. It's titled Ashtabhuja Devi. There's another chromolithograph which has it. And this picture also came under fire. It can be traced back to a painting by Raja Ravi Varma. It was printed at the Ravi Varma press, and the British government took objection to it. You won't imagine what they took objection to. They said that that buffalo there, that decapitated buffalo, looked like a cow because it was too fair. It wasn't dark enough to be a buffalo. So for all of you who are talking about fairness creams and all that, it didn't apply only to humans, it applied to buffaloes also. And they proscribed it under the provisions of the Indian Press Act. They said, no, we have to confiscate it because a lot of people are going to take objection to it by saying that Durga killed a cow. So the whole thing was confiscated, and Fritz Leiher, who was the owner of the Ravi Varma press by then, went to the Bombay High Court, and then he says, hey, listen, 1 minute, it's not a buffalo, it's a cow. It comes from the Mahishasuramardini narrative. The government in its archive says we are not likely to win the case, so I think we better settle with this guy. So they settle with him, the thing goes, and then he says, all right, as part of the sort of settlement process, in all future prints, I will make the buffalo dark. So you see, that's the dark version, and let's go back, and that's the fair version of the same print. And it happens because they are talking about cows. It goes all the way up to the Bombay High Court. Interestingly, when this happened, another print also came under fire, and that is this one, the one on the left, the cow with 84 gods. Here also the government was of the view, listen, the guy who's there, who's assaulting this man, it may appear he's assaulting a cow, and therefore please remove the person who's assaulting. And so you have the earlier version where the person is assaulting, and you have the one on the right where the man has his hands up like that for no reason at all. They just remove that character, and he's doing that for who? Later, because of all of this, the Nizam's government in 1925, they said, okay, we don't want to get into all this cow issue, this, that, and the other, and they said, no cow prince to come into the dominion of the Nizam. So the Hindu Sabha created a big fuss. They said, how dare you? So the Nizam's government had to issue a public apology by saying, all right, please allow all of the cow prince to come back. So for all of you who are thinking, this cow thing, this, that, and the, it goes all the way back to 1909 when the first cow print was actually proscribed. And then I'm getting into the other aspect of it, which is, I said, let's do fairness screams. Why not cows? We'll bring in people also. Naresh Neil comes up with this thing by saying, let's explore skin complexion. Why should all the goddesses be fair? And let's try and figure out how they would look if they were all in dark things. And he did this fantastic photo series of dark complexioned goddesses. And again, you will see how similar it is to the Ravi Varma chromolithograph over there. It is a little later that the actual Black Lives Matter incident took place. And then now the government actually went into this one by saying, you can't have fairness screams. You can't actually promote it as a fairness scream. So this is the participation in relation to skin complexion art, which is finally resulting in legislations also coming about. I'm going on to this one. This chromolithograph, now we are talking about reputation, why not? So this chromolithograph was issued, and in 1909 or 1909, there was a small reader's opinion published in the Hindu in Madras, now Chennai. And what it said is, I doubt this picture comes from a painting by Raja Ravi Varma. If someone would know, please let me know. Till here the article was absolutely fine, but he signed it anti-humbug. And this set the cat among the pigeons. So the dealer from Madras, he got so angry, he sued the Hindu. He says, please tell me who's written this. I want to know. It's defamation. Because of this, sales of this particular print has gone. The Hindu says, no, we can't reveal the name. It went all the way up to the Madras High Court, which was the highest in that particular region. And then the Hindu was called upon by saying, no, you better tell us who wrote the article, and the name of the person was divulged. It turned out to become such a hotly contested litigation in Madras that it got reported in the newspaper on a daily basis. The judge said this lawyer said this, that lawyer argued this, then the judge said this, then. There are something like about 16 full-fledged articles on what was going on in the court. It was the yesteryear of the Game of Thrones going on in the newspaper. The best lawyers came to be engaged, not the simple people. You had the Advocate General Shivaswamy Iyer, not this Shivaswamy, there's another Shivaswamy Iyer. He was helped by a gentleman, or assisted, we call them assisted, by a lawyer called Sir C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, who later on went on to become the Diwan of Travancore, appearing for the Hindu. And you had A.C. Adam, who was a barrister, appearing for the other man. The debate is absolutely interesting because it goes on by saying, first argument, which I found very interesting, is they said, 1 minute, we didn't defame you, we defamed the picture. So how is it defamation of the seller? If I comment about a picture, it is disparagement of goods, it is not defamation of character. So they tried to split that argument. Then they went into, all that is fine, but how do you know that this Ravi Varma never painted it? So a person actually came in and produced an exhibit in that case by saying there's a letter in which Ravi Varma says, I will not paint a Shivaswamy because I can't accommodate the 6 faces and make it look symmetrical. There is an actual letter by Ravi Varma which says that. So he says it's on the basis of this that I said this. That case is so interesting because it sets up another dimension. Very seldom, despite having written 6 volumes and 2,140 pages, very seldom do you actually learn the mind of the artist, where he truly comes up and says, I'm doing this or I'm not doing this. And the intentionality of the artist is so rare to come by, and that comes by in this particular case. But what is most interesting is that you had 3 of the most expensive lawyers in a very publicized litigation over a print, not even a painting. Why? Because they are trying to defend the reputation of a particular artist's legacy, the purity of it. So it goes all the way to court. They're trying to establish by saying this is Ravi Varma, this is not Ravi Varma. And it goes back to 1909. It is possibly the first litigation of defamation and art in India over this print. In England, before this, there was a litigation associated with defamation and art, and that was the painting of the Nocturne, forgetting the name of the Whistler, thank you. Whistler's Nocturne in black and gold, the falling rocket. And that got into a defamation litigation because he had accused the artist directly. But the first defamation litigation in India is this one associated with Raja Ravi Varma. The sanctity of Ravi Varma's images comes to the modern day when we had Adi Purush. And there was a petition before the Supreme Court saying, how could this man act as Ravan? And in the petition before the Supreme Court, it actually says that the ideal Ravana was painted by Raja Ravi Varma. It says in the petition. So I have to tell you this interesting story. This reporter randomly phoned me up one day. Every time the Ravi Varma lands up in court, the phone call comes to Ganesh Shivaswamy. I don't know where these reporters have had that thing. So some guy randomly phones up. I never knew about Adi Purush at all. He phones me up and he says, sir, have you heard of Adi Purush? I'm like, no. Am I supposed to know him? He says, no, it's this movie. He says, what do you think about the character of Ravan played by so-and-so? He said, I don't know, I have no opinion about it. He says, no, the Supreme Court judgment, the ideal Ravan is supposed to have been painted by Raja Ravi Varma. So what do you think, sir? Do you think Raja Ravi Varma painted the ideal Ravan? I was having such a bad day in court, and people who know me will tell you that if I'm having a bad day, I start joking. So I told this reporter very matter-of-factly, I said, I don't think Ravana had tea with, Ravi Varma had tea with Ravan to see how he looked. The guy got livid with me. He says, no, sir, you tell me, do you think that is the right Ravana? I said, even I have not had tea with Ravana to know how he looks. He says, sir, you're not answering the question. I said, you're not asking the question. He says, what's the question? I said, the question is whether an image should be static or can be fluid. If it is static, the problem is going to be, is this Ravan good, that Ravan good, 10-headed Ravan good, some other Ravan good, we don't know. But if it is fluid, anything goes. I very matter-of-factly put the phone down. Fortunately, it didn't quote me, so I think I escaped that. But what is interesting is that what starts in 1909 to say that this is a pure Ravi Varma, this is the right Ravi Varma, this is the right representation, continues to the present day in court, so much so that today not only is the Uttam Ram by Ravi Varma, the Uttam Ravan is also by Raja Ravi Varma. That's the extent to which we have come, and the sanctification of Ravi Varma's imagery lands up in court by saying, yeah, this is the right thing, this is not the right thing. I'm moving on to the next topic, which is this. The one in the center is a chromolithograph, 1895. It's titled Radha. It is from a painting by Raja Ravi Varma. And about a year and a half later, a cartoon appears in the Hindi Punch. And the title of the cartoon at the bottom says, I don't know if you all can read it, it says Grandmothers of 30. There's a beautiful conversation within that cartoon. And it is one girl talking to the other girl, and she says, why are you looking so sullen? Why are you looking so sad? And she says, I've become a grandmother at the age of 30. She says, is that something to be very proud of? You reach the pinnacle of your family, your grandmother now. She says, but I was in and out of life before I knew it. It's time to change the marriage laws. Today, you can't imagine such a situation. And what was actually happening at the same time when the cartoon came up was the case of Rukmabai, the lady who you see there. And what was happening to her, and there's a movie about her now, is that she got married when she was very young. Child marriage in those days was quite common. And when she came of age, she had to go to her husband's house, and she says, I'm not going to go. The husband said, actually filed a petition for restitution and says, nothing doing, she's my wife, you better ask her to come. Long story short, it goes all the way up to the Bombay High Court. The Bombay High Court says, yes, you please go because you're the wife. She petitions Queen Victoria and the marriage gets annulled. And it is during that time that the cartoon comes out to sensitize people in relation to the age of marriage of girls, saying if you don't do something about it, you're going to have grandmothers of 30. Look at the powerful statement being made using art, and now you're looking at art propelling legislation. We've looked at cases till now. We are now looking at how art foments litigation, promotes litigation, sensitizes people to issues resulting in litigations. That's the section I've now come to. It is only much after this that the Age of Consent Act came, and now you have the age of marriage being established at 21 and 18. But imagine what was going on at that point in time. And Ravi Varma's images participate in that movement. I'm moving on to the next one, and this is very powerful. I have to tell you that this series of images do not find a place in my book because they refused to give me permission, and these are copyrighted. What was going on? The Domestic Violence Act had already come into force, and people were not getting it. They were not understanding the place of women in domestic violence. So an agency, an advertising agency in Bombay called Taproot, they said we are going to come out with this series of campaigns, and they called it the Abused Goddesses Campaign. And in case you're wondering, almost all of them are from the Ravi Varma press. They're all derivations from the Ravi Varma press, especially the Saraswati. There's a beautiful slogan at the bottom which says that if we don't stop violence of women at home, even the ones we pray to are going to look like that. It was a very, very powerful campaign, and it used Ravi Varma. And I'm given to understand this immediately after that, a few months after that, Nirbhaya also took place. But the campaign was pulled down. Why? Because of the association of divinity with a social cause. They said no. There was a lot of objection to it. They said no, how can you use gods and goddesses to show this aspect of human life? And the campaign was pulled down. When I reached out to them and said, I want an image for the book, they said, sorry sir, we can't give it to you. And I went through all the legal circles I knew. They said, sir, I'm sorry, we just can't convince the board to give it to you. But I'm allowed to use it for an academic talk, which is why I keep talking about it by saying, this is how powerful the Ravi Varma image continues to remain even today, where they're using it to sensitize people for so many causes, including domestic violence. Let's look at copyright. I'm sure all of you all, especially the art community, first question I will get, sir, is Ravi Varma copyrighted? Everyone asks me that. So let's understand whether Ravi Varma is copyrighted or not. The reality in relation to copyright of engravings actually ran through a lot of trouble. As it goes back to 1850 when the Bengal Photographic Society petitioned the government by saying, please bring in copyright in relation to photographs and engravings. Then Ravi Varma petitioned. Then Fritz Leiher, who was the owner of the press, petitioned. He said, please bring it in, because we are seeing this kind of thing, the kind of bootlegging which is going on. Finally, in 1913, Fritz Leiher, who was the owner of the Ravi Varma press, got so angry, he actually filed a petition before the Bombay High Court, and he said, will you please stop this? We can't deal with this anymore. And the petition got dismissed. And that's the article reporting it. It says, it's been around for 20 years. So Lakshmi cannot belong to you. It belongs to everybody. It was a year after this, in 1914, that the amendment of the Copyright Act came about, and engravings also came to be under the umbrella of the Copyright Act. So to answer the questions of so many, whether Ravi Varma's images are within the copyright, the answer is Ravi Varma died in 1906. The amendment came in 1914. So Ravi Varma at no point of time was within copyright. Of course, now we say 60 years since the death of the author or the artist, but it didn't even apply to Ravi Varma because he had died much before even the copyright amendment had come about. Copyright and art continues to remain a major problem. And there was another litigation. This I'm going to slightly step out of Ravi Varma because I need to highlight that both the legal community as also the art community have many questions which we still have to resolve. What happened in this case? This happened in Bangalore. This is Yusuf Arakal. Yusuf Arakal died. He did not have a will insofar as his paintings were concerned or who the copyright goes to. He is survived by two people, his widow and his son. The son filed a case and obtained an injunction against the display of Yusuf Arakal's paintings, saying, I am the substantial copyright owner. The court granted the injunction. The exhibition came to a stall. After the period of the exhibition was over, he simply withdrew the case. So till today, we do not have a judicial pronouncement of it at all. Look at the problem which we have now. Yusuf Arakal's original paintings went on display. He wasn't copying them. Question number one, does the Copyright Act apply to the originals, or does the Copyright Act apply only to copies of them? Unresolved. Here they got an injunction. I would argue it only applies to the copies because that's copyright. It doesn't apply to the original. Because if you say it applies to the original, then what about the originals and private collections? Are you going to put a towel over them simply because he's not given you permission? You can't see them. Problem number one, which we do not have an answer to. Problem number two, he had two heirs, the widow and the son. Let's assume the widow said, yes, please go ahead. And the son says, no, don't go ahead. Which view do you adopt? It's split exactly down the middle. Are you going to say, okay, let's cover half the painting, half of it can be viewed? Or are you going to take his entire estate and say one half put in storage, one half can come out? These are issues which we don't even have answers to. But they still come knocking at our door. We don't have answers to them. And both the art community as also the legal community are sometimes at a roadblock, at a dead end, and we really don't know the answers to very many questions, and they're still coming up. Not just Ravi Varma, we're having Yusuf Arakal also now. I'm moving into the next one, which is this. There's a small article in the Times of India, 1987. And what happened is Jaya Bachchan wanted to sensitize people in relation to what today we would call special needs children. So what she did is she had this dance ballet Bharatanatyam dance ballet, and had these children pose like tableau vivants and trying to mainstream them, basically saying, yes, you are also beautiful dancer. And this got reported in the paper, but I'm going to read it out to you because I also want to explain to you that we as a society have also sensitized ourselves. And you will not even imagine listening to words like this. Let's read the first paragraph. It has to be seen to be believed that dance, ballet, and Ramayana by the handicapped, deaf and mute, blind, orthopedically handicapped, and mentally retarded. You won't imagine using a word like that in public spaces today. We've sensitized ourselves, but the sensitization starts then. Where is Ravi Varma? You'll see it in the last but one paragraph. It says, another deaf-mute Kashinath did a convincing Bharata in the concluding coronation scene, which was an authentic Pattabhishekam recalling a classic painting of Ravi Varma. Way out in 1987, by this time Ravi Varma is actually coming under heavy critical fire by the academicians. But when you're looking at a policy sensitization, who do you go back to? You go back to Raja Ravi Varma. And this is the beauty of it. And this was in 1987. It is only later in 1996 that you have an enactment which comes in and says, see, listen, we're going to treat everybody equally. So I hope that through this talk, you all have realized, that's the last. And I just wanted to also show you that the new work which is being done on sensitization using tactile art for people with low vision to see art again is going back to Raja Ravi Varma. So look at how Raja Ravi Varma constantly resonates now in the legal and policy space. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now pose a few questions, thoughts for all of you all. For those of you all in the art community who are here, I'm sure you must be thinking, oh my God, we've never known any of this. For those of you all in the legal community here, I'm sure you all are thinking, my God, we never knew art played such an impact in policy making. So the question is an outsider's view relevant? I come back to the question I started with. Is the outsider's view relevant? An outsider like me writing on art, is it relevant? There are multiple views. One is to say, get lost. I mean, go back to court. We really don't care for you. Dress like a penguin. Who cares? This is one view. The other view is, let's assume you're in a stadium. The spectator goes in. He's carrying popcorn and Coke. And he starts screaming at the player and he says, run fast, run fast. And the player comes back to him and says, listen, 1 minute, what do you know what I'm going through? I'm the insider, you're the outsider. I know how difficult it is to run fast or do what you're telling me to do. So stay away from it. This is one view. The second view which is possible is that the spectator could tell the player, who are you playing for? Are you playing only for yourself? Or are you playing for me? I am the outsider. This brings in a huge question, not just who is a game for, who is art for, who is law for, who is religion for, who is politics for, who is power for, who is policy for. Is it only for the players of those fields or is it for the public at large, including the outsider? The second argument which the spectator could put in is by saying, yes, you may be playing on the field and you can only see what is in front of you. I can even see what's behind you. So while you may have the view, I have the vision. And if I somewhat know the dynamics of how it is played, my vision is better than yours. So I would like to go there and say, yes, the lawyer is entitled to write on art, and we bring in a completely new perspective to what only you all have been dealing with. This is the other argument. But there is a larger argument than this also which I wish to make. has the time now come for us to encourage an interdisciplinary approach to learning? Should we be using this as an example for all of you all looking out? Is it also right to say that fine, specialization is all great and good, but at some level specialization results in knowing more and more of less and less until you know everything about nothing? Does specialization also therefore result in some form of insensitivity to what is happening around it? Has the time now come for a holistic view rather than specialization? And with those thoughts, I conclude.